I'm going to hand this over now to Jason of MCJ, as it's called. My Climate Journey, or MCJ, it's really become the go-to podcast for the burgeoning climate tech movement. And Jason, he's evolved MCJ really to include an entire member community that serves as a hub of collaboration around climate tech solutions and climate in general, as well as an early stage venture fund that's investing in cutting edge of climate tech. And as an entrepreneur himself, Jason definitely knows firsthand how hard it can be to get initial solutions to market. And now he's working to help climate entrepreneurs do that too. So Jason, take it away. Excited for this panel.
Thanks, Cody. Well, super excited to be here, and such an awesome group. And it's great. I mean, a lot of people are in the audience to listen, but selfishly, I don't think of this as a panel. I think of this as like free consulting from all of you, because this is a super important topic and one that it is a hard one to navigate. I mean, even for us now with MCJ as we grow. So really excited to hear from this diverse group about how you're thinking about collaboration and partnerships. But before we jump into that, maybe just some brief intros. So in the order that I see them on my screen, Jasmine, maybe just introduce yourself, and Gooder.
Thanks so much, Jason. My name is Jasmine Crow, founder and CEO of Gooder. We are an Atlanta-based startup. We were part of Techstars Anywhere 2018, and we are leveraging technology to combat hunger and food waste. 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food goes to waste every year in this country, while 54 million people are going hungry, and we think that these two problems can solve each other, and that's what we're working on.
Awesome. And maybe just talk a bit too about to what extent you've been engaging with big companies thus far. We don't have to get into too much depth, but just kind of a quick sanity check on how much collaboration you've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, we have some great collaborations. Our partners include the NBA, Porsche, Wendy's. We work with the Atlanta airport, several convention centers. We have a national partnership that we'll be announcing soon with Sodexo Magic, the company Hungry. So you name it, we're really all over the place trying to make sure that food doesn't go to waste.
Oh, good. Well, I have tons of questions for you that we'll come back to. So how about you, Diego?
Hi, Jason. Hi, Jasmine. Hi, Nicolas. Hi, everyone in the audience. My name is Diego Saez-Gil. I'm co-founder and CEO of Pachama. Pachama is a technology startup with a mission of restoring nature to solve climate change. And specifically, we develop artificial intelligence algorithms that analyze satellite images in order to measure and monitor the carbon sequestration of forests. And then we use that data to bring more transparency, accountability, and efficiency to the world of forest carbon markets, with the ultimate goal of helping drive more funding from corporations and governments towards effective forest restoration, which is a key solution to climate change.
Thanks, Diego. And then what about partnerships and collaboration? How much of that have you been doing, and what kinds of organizations do you work with?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of large organizations. That's been our intention since day one. We are working with Amazon, we are working with Microsoft, we're working with Shopify. Today I had a really nice surprise. I woke up this morning and Jeff Bezos wrote his letter to shareholders, which he's been writing since 1997. And Pachama is mentioned on this letter this year, among other companies that they invested on the Amazon Climate Pledge Fund. And yeah, it's been lots of learnings on how to work with these giant companies. And we're a tiny startup, but there's some complementarity there.
Yeah, no, this is good. I've got a bunch of questions for you too, as it turns out. So Nicholas, last but not least.
Thank you, and happy to be here. I'm Nicholas. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Opus 12. We've developed a device that can recycle CO2 emissions. So we can take CO2 and turn it into things that are normally made from fossil fuels. So some projects we have going, and this would answer part of the partnership question. As an example, we made the world's first car part from CO2 with Mercedes-Benz last year. Procter & Gamble a couple weeks ago announced our partnership with them to make carbon negative ingredients for Tide. And later this summer, we'll be producing carbon neutral jet fuel with the Air Force. Early on in our life cycle, we partnered with Shell and SoCal Gas. So really, we're looking at working with both kind of downstream brands who could take advantage of having CO2-based materials, as well as their upstream suppliers in the energy and chemical space. So working with all kinds of different types of collaborators.
Amazing. You know, I like that you're also active working with these big companies, but also that you've just got such different businesses and different perspectives to bring. Well, one thing that I'll start with is just, as a startup, I mean, as you all know well, small team, limited resources, not enough time in the day, focus is paramount. On the one hand, it's really appealing to think about these big logos that can probably be helpful for validation and fundraising and hiring and distribution and revenue and things like that. And on another, I mean, they can be just huge time sucks, distractions. They can lead you astray from your core roadmap. There's just all these horror stories of partnering too early and having it suck up a lot of time and a lot of resource in ways that can be really detrimental. So maybe it'd be great to hear from each of you on this one. Just how have you thought about balancing that, and when was the right time to start thinking about working with larger organizations? Any brave, we don't have to go in order. Any brave volunteers that want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. I would say that in our case, we actually started trying to partner with startups. We were part of Y Combinator, and so we said, well, we can tap into the YC community, and we went and started, we basically scraped the book face list of YC startups and started, sending emails to the founders saying, like, look, we're trying to do this, trying to validate our hypothesis. And we actually got, the founders of Zapier, the founders of, several YC startups getting back to us and say, like, this is so cool, love to help you, and then put us in touch with someone on their teams. So I think that sometimes, here we are in the Techstars, event. The Techstars is another awesome community, right? So sometimes startups, because you can get to the founders, are an easier way to bootstrap those partnerships while you build a solution that actually makes sense. Because at the first few days of a startup, you have really a prototype of what you have in mind, and showing up in a large corporation with a prototype probably is not ideal, right? So whereas startups are a little bit more flexible and a little bit more, they are startups themselves, they were a prototype, a few years ago, so they might be more forgiving on your solution. And then once you have something that you feel a little bit less embarrassed of, you can go to a larger company. That's been one of our paths.
And is there a danger, Diego, that the needs of those startups will be different than the needs of the big companies, so that they can actually lead you astray from what the big companies will need when you try to climb the food chain?
Yeah, I guess so. But at the same time, you continue validating and talking to other types of organizations and input that information. But just trying to close as customers or effective partners these companies that are willing to move faster. And I think you have to go to whoever is going to be faster to put a signature on a paper and send you a check, right? And probably startups are the case. And again, in our case, we are a software company, if you want. Maybe for a hardware company that's selling, electric vehicles, probably you have to go to a big company, right? So it's case by case, but for us, that has been a technique.
Well, Nicholas, you are not a software company. So maybe talk a little bit about how you thought about partnerships, and maybe a little more about just kind of how you're engaging with these partners as well, and what types of partners you found the biggest success with, both initially and today.
Yeah, I think for us, because we're inventing new chemistry, what's important for us early on is, even for fundraising from investors, to actually show, in some ways, by working with big companies, it's a bit of a validation of the technology and that the concept we're developing could have large applications. While we actually do have collaborations with startups now, early on, the kind of credibility of working with a shell was essential for us. The way we've thought about it is we have a rule, which is that we have our kind of core technology development roadmap, and we won't deviate from that. So we try to find partnerships that align with our core product development pathway. So in some cases, that's led us to not partner with companies. Sometimes there's also just, we think about, is this pilot or partnership, does it have a clear roadmap to scale that we're aligned on? And does the ultimate application make sense for our technology? So as an example, one, we look a lot at converting industrial emissions and taking the CO2 and turning it right back into useful products on site. For an industry like power generation, like a coal power plant that's releasing CO2 to make energy, that's less of a good application for us because we need energy to run our process. And it's much more useful if the customer actually has an application for the things that we're making from CO2, which wouldn't be the case in the power sector. So although we get a lot of inbounds from them because they really want to reduce their CO2, we do have those conversations to say, hey, there's better ways to decarbonize electricity than our technology. We're really focused on industry materials and fuels. So there's some vetting as well.
In your case, given that there's so much time with R&D up front, how early is too early? I mean, did you start these discussions pretty much from day one, or did you worry at all that showing too early you would miss your shot because you would show poorly when if you had waited you'd make a better first impression? Or how do you think about that balance of how quickly to pick your head up and also just how much to share given the might and the resources in the R&D departments of these large organizations?
I don't think there's any point that's too early. I think part of your job as a deep tech kind of new hardware type startup, part of your job is to survive long enough for the big companies to be ready to engage and to understand it. And so there have been relationships that we've been building for a few years now that are now converting, and they're like, we're ready to do this. We're really into CO2 conversion, and they know us and we're a known factor. So even if we haven't done a pilot, actually getting them on board. So I think maybe if it's like a very easy to implement or existing solution, that might be different. But for us, there is an education. And I think finding early adopters to support us early on was also key for us, then attracting other funding, both from venture investors and from government funding. So we have a lot of funding from Department of Energy, NASA, National Science Foundation. They all want to see customer traction as well. So it's really important early on, both for non-dilutive and investor funding, to start having those customer conversations.
And moving on to you, Jasmine. So you talked a bit about food waste and connecting the surplus food with the homeless population, and then you mentioned a bunch of big, well-known customers or partners that you work with. So in what capacity are you working with these big organizations, and at what stage in your company growth did you start, and what did you wrestle with? How did you think about it? Just any color you want to add around, how you went about engaging and what you've learned along the way would be awesome.
Definitely, Jason. Definitely just want to make sure to correct you that we're not just serving people that are experiencing homelessness. Our food makes its way to seniors, to children, to families, anyone that is experiencing hunger. Included in that, definitely some of our network partners include homeless shelters, but really spans the gamut of need. I was bootstrapping Gooder when I first started in 2017 until I got our first really large scale customer. And that was the Atlanta airport, which is the world's busiest airport, houses over 120 restaurants. And it was really a dream customer for us because what that showed is I wanted to go after businesses that had a lot of food in one location so that I can amass a lot of excess and be able to get that to a lot of people in need. While airports were critical, and I'm sure Nicholas knows this, they are huge carbon offset. They put out tons of carbon. Jet fuel is terrible for the environment. And so what I needed to do is go into this airport and show how bad they are on the environment. Plus, in the Atlanta area, one of the advantages that I had is that they were also in a food desert. So the airport sits in a critical food desert where 62% of children were living in poverty. And so I had a really compelling argument, if you will, to say, you are bad on the environment, you're bad on your community, you're wasting all this food, people are going hungry right next door. And so they gave us a chance. From there, it's really made conversations easier for us as we start talking to additional airports because we've proven that we could be successful in the world's busiest airport with the most restaurants, with the, the largest amount of challenges. So it's really worked with us. I think in these other brands, we like to take a tops down approach. So we partnered with the NBA. We worked with the NBA for NBA All-Star Weekend. Now we've worked with the Lakers, the Atlanta Hawks, the Pelicans. We have, meetings coming up with about 7 or 8 other teams because we went to the league first and said you could take a stand on addressing food waste and hunger across your stadiums and arenas. And because they stamped us, it made it real easy for us to now email other teams and start having conversations. I think these things are important for startups. It was really important for me to get that first initial customer to believe in us. And one thing I always will say is, I think Diego hit it on the head, right? You don't want to go with a subpar product to a big company. But if you do, which is where I was when I first got the airport, I went in and said, you guys are the first to do this. You're going to be the one that people think about when they think about food waste and hunger. You're going to help us revolutionize this. And they understood that there are definitely some kinks and some bugs we were having to work out in our technology, but we did it together.
That's really interesting, because you can say the same thing 2 different ways and have it be received 2 different ways. You can say, it's like, you mean I'm going to be first? It's not proven. How do I know it's going to work? What about if this goes wrong? What about if that goes wrong? I'm not going to go first. What are you, crazy? Versus like, you're going to be first. You're going to be the pioneer. You're going to pave the way. You're going to beat everyone else to market. This is where the puck is going, right? And it's the same facts, right? It's just like.
And they got great press out of it, and it was a really good win for them. But yeah, they had to take a chance. And really, all you really need is that one champion. And that's what we had. We had one person that believed at the airport and brought us in front of as many of the partners as they could gather in a room. And then I presented to them. And then we got like the go ahead, like, what do we have to lose? This is good for, as I said, the environment. It's good for our community. It's good for us as a company. And so I like to call Gooder a triple bottom line, a win-win-win. And if you can sell them on those points, I think that's a critical thing.
Well, Diego talked about wanting to get to the big customers, but using the small customers that move more quickly as a way to kind of, get that fast learning, get that fast track record, and get kind of a running start to build your way up. You did not do that approach. And I'm curious, just as a young company, no matter how good the story is, and you're going to be first and you're going to pioneer and all the things we just talked about, without that track record, how do you get the big companies comfortable that you can actually deliver?
Yeah, it really becomes the founders. I think it's the same way like with investors, right? Without the track record, they may, you don't have a ton of product market fit. You haven't made a ton of money, but they're going to still invest in you. And I think it really comes down to you as a founder and how you can deliver the story. What I think I did really well, Jason, is I really knew the problem that I was solving. And I often said, no one knows hunger and food waste more than me. I would study till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning in my 1-bedroom apartment on my laptop that was like on its last leg, reading every report. And before I started Gooder, I was feeding people that were experiencing homelessness on the streets from my kitchen for almost 4 years. So I understood the problem, firsthand, tangibly. I had, the relationships with the shelters, the programs that were going to take this food. So I did a lot of the groundwork first. And one of the things that I started doing is when I was in that customer discovery period, I was using my car, which I don't have anymore because I discovered it started to stink if I didn't have the food packaged right. So obviously that made our whole process better. But I would go to any restaurant that would let me, and I would pick up their excess food, and then I would deliver it myself. I would take a picture, show the restaurant. So I had proven the process before I even had the technology. And all I had when I started with Atlanta was a clickable prototype that the team at Pivotal Software built for me when they were on beach. And I just went to office hours with them and had them build the prototype for me. And I didn't actually get the full technology built until after I graduated Techstars. So almost a full year later, the airport worked with me as I was building the technology, but they gave me that letter of intent. They signed up and they actually paid for us before we even had the product, which was, I don't think that would happen a lot. We were probably really lucky then.
Well, some advice I often give to founders, and it's frustrating because it's hard to kind of figure out how to operationalize this advice, but the advice is to convey inevitability. And I feel like the best way to operationalize it would essentially be to take everything you just said as a clip and just send them that to listen to in terms of how to convey inevitability when you don't have the goods yet. Because I mean, I was on the edge of my seat when you just went through that, and I can see why you got those first yeses. I'm going to pull a bit of an audible. This wasn't on my list of questions to cover, but when I hear you guys talking, one obvious question that comes to mind to me, which I hadn't thought of before, is how much of this is the job of the CEO, and when is the right time to hire a biz dev person? And when you hire that biz dev person, what do they look like? Is it senior? Is it junior? And does that happen in phases too? Like, how do you think about that? I can call on someone unless there's a volunteer to kick it off.
I'm happy to share my perspective. In the early phases, I think it's the job of the CEO. You're kind of figuring out and defining the playbook, and the kind of amount of latitude, flexibility, and on your feet decisions, I think make a lot of sense to keep within the CEO because of the amount of accountability that you have to the company. For us, my first business development hire was actually a chief of staff role. And it actually came up when I was doing Techstars Energy during Mentor Madness. I was like, I want to follow up with everybody, and there's no way I can. And so it was actually just, I felt like I needed an extension of myself. We're thinking about
Techstars plug you worked in there. One for the home team.
That's right. But that was so valuable. For us, we're thinking about bringing on kind of the seasoned executive from the chemical industry, maybe like in a year from now or so, once we've gotten the playbook a bit more defined, and then it's more about scaling the process than defining it. That's at least advice that I've been given about the right time to think about that.
What about you, Diego? You've got all kinds of big logos that you work with now. So how did you think about that? How much was you doing the legwork, and how much was someone else? And when you brought in someone else, when and where did you start?
Yeah, for a long time it was me, and I still continue to focus on the bigger companies that we want to work with. And I do think when I was listening to Jasmine, I was feeling inspired myself. And I want to help you, Jasmine, after this. And I think
too. It's awesome. Yeah.
That level of excitement and inspiration sometimes, only the CEO and founder can give, right? So, and I think that is the job of the CEO and founder, be the source of the vision, and at the beginning is a lot about that, more than the product or whatever you have already built. But then, yes, you want to amplify yourself, right? So we brought first, the typical hustler, someone who was super passionate about our mission, who went and shamelessly cold email everyone on sustainability that we could get a hold of. Then we brought onto the team an expert, someone who could, speak from the expertise of carbon markets, right? And only now, and Jason, because you introduced me actually to a person that we ended up hiring, we brought a professional executive on business development to help us scale to the next level. So it was kind of like a gradual professionalization, if you want, of going to market.
Now, Jasmine, I already know that it was you from your story so far, but maybe talk a little bit about whether it's still you and how you're thinking about scaling the function over time.
I think now I come in as like the closer. So I don't do a lot. I don't do any of the initial seeding. I have an amazing head of growth and business development and a great team under him. And I sat with him for a long time. And, he's not me, but I talked to him about why this was important, what this meant. I do a lot of culture talks at Gooder where I bring everyone together. And so like the one I'm doing next week, we got an email from someone that received food from us that said, hey, she gets $16 a month in food stamps. She's a senior. So our culture activity is to like go grocery shopping for a whole month with $16. Because I want people that work for me to really understand, what it means from a hunger standpoint, but then also we're a B Corp. So we're really about sustainability. If you come to our office, there must be like 12 different receptacles of where different things are going to go. And so we really are always talking about food waste. But I think having him sit with me, learn about the culture that I'm trying to build was really critical. And one of the things that I fell into, and this is a caution, is because I was such the face of the company, the salesperson, it made it really hard for other people to kind of sell for me, because people are like, oh, well, we want to talk to Jasmine. Would it be possible to meet with Jasmine? And that's something that's not always great, because you're not always going to be around. So now I think we have a much better system, and I still come in and close meetings, but it's kind of like I let them actually carry the most of the meeting. And then I'm like, so let's get started, guys. What do we need to do? I'm going to have Blake do X, Y, and Z, but I really let him lead. And then I just kind of come in and close when I need to. But of course, they close tons of deals without me. But if needed, I come in and really bring it home.
Now, for the early stage founders that are listening, and I'm sure, or viewing, I should say, I'm sure there's a bunch. I bet what's on their mind is, well, that's all well and good that it's got to be me, but I'm already working 7 days a week just to get the product built. So and if I leave, I don't feel like the team's in a spot where that engine's going to be cranking without me. So how do I go out and do what I need to do externally when there's already not enough for me to go around on the product side? How do you guys handle that?
Problem. Yeah, you're going to get burnt out really easy. You've got to build a team. There's just when I first started Gooder, I was a team of one. I went from feeding people to I'm going to start this company. I'm doing everything on my own. And I would have definitely been burnt out if I didn't start finding people. One of the things that I learned back in my Techstars days is sometimes you have to hire and fire fast. It sucks because hiring, it just takes a lot of time, sometimes costs a lot of money, but you'll get people in, you train them, you start to create these processes, and you're going to find the best people. And if they don't work for you, I think making it very clear up front, hey, we're going to bring you on. We're a startup, so we're moving, at the speed of lightning. And if this doesn't work for us, there's an understanding that there may not be a, continuation, but you're going to have to be your first salesperson. If you're a tech person, you're totally building the product, then I definitely think you need a co-founder that is non-technical that could sell. I definitely think, for me, I'm non-technical, but I know I needed someone on the team that was technical. So I had to go out and find that. But if you're technical, you definitely need someone who could get in the room, because I can tell you, with dealing with my product people and engineers, a lot of times I don't know what they're talking about. So I have to say, give me bullet points that I can then give to our investors and customers, because their mind thinks way different than what your traditional customer is going to think about, unless you're selling to a CIO or a CTO that's thinking like that. It just really depends on who your customer is.
Cody texted me that we have 2 minutes to wrap, but I do want to jam one more substantive question in if I can. And that is, we've talked a lot generically about when's the right time to partner, who's going to do the work to partner. But now I actually want to talk about, in the slate of partners, it's a huge time suck to work, especially with these large organizations. So what are some tips for early stage founders to figure out upfront and screen these partners to figure out when to invest the time and when to walk away?
I can jump there. Someone who's a sales expert gave me a really good advice, which was, in the first call that you have with a potential customer, 70% of the time they are talking and you are listening, right? So you're asking questions, you're trying to understand their problems, where they're at, their budget, who's the decision maker, is this something that they are ready to move or not? And you're basically first bringing empathy, but second, qualifying, is this really a potential partner or not, right? If it's not, you may want to move on to other partners that might be more ready, right? That's what worked for us.
Nicholas?
Yeah, I'd say if you can start to look at what kind of influence they have, and do they know, this is a very B2B answer, but if they know how to navigate these giant organizations, and if you sense that they get the vision and they're willing to navigate and put in the work, it kind of reminds me of Jasmine talking about this first customer at the Atlanta airport. That person sounds amazing. I call them our visionary customer. So at Mercedes, we found a guy who knows how to work it, and I cherish that relationship and treat it really like a partnership. I'm always available to talk. Once I saw that he knew how to get through and make things happen, that's when you really start to invest.
So I think we're going to get the axe, but before we do, this is a panel about partnerships. So how can the audience be helpful to you on your partner efforts? Let's just go around real quick before Cody gives us the boot. Jasmine.
Hey, we're looking to connect with cities. We're looking to connect with more governments, large-scale business venues. Gooder is also hiring a lead software engineer, full stack software developer. I dropped my LinkedIn in the chat, so definitely connect with me.
Diego.
So every company has to have a net zero plan today. If your company doesn't have one, you should be asking why, and you should start building one. And if you do, that means measuring, reducing your emissions, and then offsetting. And if you're gonna do it, you have to do it with credible, effective carbon credits, and we have that, from great reforestation and forest conservation projects. So come talk to us if you wanna get started with that. We also release an API if you wanna integrate products and services with credible carbon credits. Come talk to us.
Okay, we're on borrowed time, but last but not least, Nicholas, Opus 12. What do you guys need?
Yeah, we're looking to partner with brands in automotive, apparel, airlines, really anybody who has a CO2 footprint in their materials or products, as well as on the upstream side, oil and gas, chemicals, and plastics. So would love to talk to all.
Well, I learned so much. You guys are amazing. So, Jasmine, did you have something to say?
I was telling Nicholas I have a contact for him, so I'm definitely going to shoot him a message.
Look at that. Thank you, Jasmine.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys were so great. So thank you. I learned a ton. I hope everyone else did. And Cody, take it away.